The long-awaited Marvel Snap Balance patch is finally with us, and many players are now getting their teeth stuck into a brand new metagame on the ladder, trying to figure out what's still good, what's improved thanks to the changes, and overall what cards we should be paying attention to that maybe we weren't paying attention to before. So today, I'm going to take some time to break down for you the 5 decks I would be playing on the ladder right now if I was looking to make my way up to the infinite rank, having not done so already, following the recent balance adjustments. If you enjoy this type of content, you've got to be sure to let me know. Leave a comment down below for us. What are you thinking about the current metagame, and has enough changed to keep yourself focused on Marvel Snap? If you haven't already, do subscribe to the channel here on YouTube to make us keep making content over here at Marvel Snap Zone, and make sure to like the video while you're down there to keep those YouTube gods happy for me. With all that said, let's take a step over and take a look at some of the decks I think stand to thrive in the brand new metagame. So I'm going to start this video off with a small honourable mention, and that's going to go to various Thanos lists. One of the questions I got asked the most during last night's live stream is Thanos still worth buying? Is Thanos still good? Is the card still playable? Etc, etc. And I currently believe the answer to that is yes. I don't think the changes to Thanos are impactful enough to knock the card out of the metagame entirely. The Space Stone change seems like a really healthy one to disable more overall lockjaw shenanigans. Quinjet, I think I advocated for that change during our last Buffs and Nerfs video, so I'm very happy to see it. And honestly, the change to Thanos' power is mostly a non-factor. Overall, this makes me believe the deck is still very, very playable, be that in the form of the ongoing version of the deck, the Zoo-style strategy that we saw at the top of Tier 2 towards the end of last month, or whether it is still a traditional lockjaw style deck that many of your favourite content creators have already been trying on the ladder since the patch. I don't think this deck is going anywhere. You can definitely still expect to see it at the upper echelons of the game, but thankfully it should hopefully be a bit more in line with the rest of the metagame now, as opposed to being such a overwhelming, dominating force. For the actual top 5 decks, we're going to start with the ones that I think are more commonly understood to be good in the metagame going forward, and then move on to the more exciting ones at the end of the video. So first of all, unsurprisingly, Shuri Zero probably stands to be one of the biggest kingpins of Marvel Snap going forward. If we're looking at why this might be, it's important to take a look at what I think the current nerfs and changes have facilitated. For the most part, the most impactful changes on this balance patch is Aero. Aero and the changes to Thanos overall. Aero is definitely not going to be anywhere near as good as she was before, definitely not omnipresent in the metagame, and likely going to be a tech choice in certain strategies, more than a kind of core staple of many of the decks in Marvel Snap. That's going to affect what's good in the metagame quite significantly, and Shuri Zero actually gained a small benefit from Aero's change overall, because now they can follow up their final turn big play of Taskmaster or She-Hulk or the like with a Titania or a Zero in order to stop it being moved to where you want it to go, and I feel that's quite a big change for Shuri Zero, giving it more counterplay into a card like Aero. Above all else though, I truly don't think the adjustments to this deck were particularly impactful. Taskmaster is arguably been buffed overall, and I don't think a 26 power Red Skull is going to be much easier to beat than a 30 power one was anyway, truth be told. On top of that, the change to Taskmaster is definitely a relevant one and gives Shang-Chi more play into this deck, but Shang-Chi was already omnipresent in the metagame because of this deck. It's not like it's gotten worse against a card that wasn't seeing play before. We already had that tool available to us, one that is commonly shut off by Armor and Cosmo. As a result, I still kind of expect this deck to be, if not the best deck in the game, certainly one of the contenders in the conversation, and you can build it in a number of ways. If you don't have access to Sauron in this deck, or if you don't want to play Sauron in this deck because you're worried about keeping Cosmo and Armor active, I highly suggest maybe switching Ebony Maw for Titania yourself, and then maybe Typhoid Mary for a card like Captain Marvel or Vision to give yourself more location flexibility alongside your copy of Shuri. This one is not going anywhere in my opinion, and you should expect to see a lot of it on the ladder moving forward. The other non-surprising entity on this list is Galactus. This is not my favourite deck, as many of the regulars of the channel are aware. It offers some very polarising play patterns overall that a lot of people really kind of enjoy massively or don't enjoy whatsoever. The reason I think Galactus stands to gain from this is mostly just from the fact there will be less aero in the metagame as the card falls off from not particularly being good enough against the majority of the meta, and less leech in the metagame as well. There's no guarantee the Thanos decks remain Thanos Lockjaw decks, and I think arguably leech coming out much slower might just kind of discourage those decks from playing leech in the first place, moving more towards Captain Marvel or Vision or Doctor Doom, other more flexible cards to cheat into play from Lockjaw as opposed to trying to leech your opponent's hand. These are two very, very good things for Galactus. They were two of the big reasons he was so easily disrupted. The Devourer of Worlds is very happy to see those two cards dropping off in play. That being said, there are still plenty of ways to interact with Galactus, one that many people of course very familiar with in the form of Cosmo, but many other options as well. We're going to look at a few decks coming up that are actually good, I think anyway, thanks to the popularity of Galactus, and they have the tools to be able to attack that deck overall. Deck number 3 is my pick for the best Series 3 deck in the game, and that remains the case at the moment moving into the new metagame in my opinion. That's DoomWave. It's largely untouched. The only adjustment this deck had to really stare at was the changes to Aero and She-Hulk. Personally, I think the She-Hulk change is mostly nominal at best. The card's probably still very, very good. The stat line change probably not losing you many games you weren't already losing beforehand. Most importantly, I think this might be the best home for Aero moving forward if you're looking for a place to continue to play that card and have it shine for you against those competitive decks at the top of the metagame, mostly because of the interaction with Wave. Something this deck has always been doing is playing Wave on turn 5 to enable She-Hulk plus a big card on turn number 6. Well, Aero's changes are less impactful to you if you only expect your opponent to be playing one card on the final turn of the game anyway, meaning you can still move it to wherever you might want it to go. This is kind of a great home for the card as a result, and I hope Aero remains good enough to stay in this deck overall. Most of all, though, I think this deck is just super flexible, and it's great for those Series 3 players who are looking to attack players with more curated Series 4 and Series 5 collections. It's very flexible. You could definitely make room for cards like Cosmo or Debris or Polaris as required to adapt to the top of the metagame. You have space for a card like Shang-Chi. You have an overall proactive game plan where you can play to the board early yourself and finish with a nice big turn 6 flourish thanks to Wave. And overall, I still just think Doctor Doom is one of the most underappreciated cards in Marvel Snap. It's just very, very good on rate and lets you play to multiple locations simultaneously, meaning you're always going to have more game into decks like Electro Sandman or similar decks that might want to shut down what you're able to do in those final turns. Really big fan of this one, have been since before the patch. Don't expect that to change anytime soon. Deck number 4 that I'd recommend for you are the various flavors of Sera Control. You can definitely pick whichever version of this deck you prefer to play. Sera is a great deck and is fun for players who enjoy those kind of reactive play patterns and like to be able to counteract what their opponent is doing on those final turns of the game. You could look to go into the Devil Dinosaur Darkhawk style version of this deck and give yourself more raw stats on the final turn of the game, or you can move towards my personal favorite version of this deck in Toxic Sera, giving you some tools to actively push people from going wide over the course of the game if you don't think Shuri Zero or Galactus are much a problem when you have access to tools like Shang-Chi. Overall, I think this deck has the ability to play back into the two decks I believe to be the biggest contenders early on, thanks to having room for cards like Shang-Chi or Valkyrie against Shuri, and even cards like Cosmo or Polaris against Galactus. It has a powerful reactive game plan that should improve with less leech being in the room overall, and this deck has been notoriously good at winning big cube games due to the fact a lot of your power is hidden until the very end of the game. I'm a really big fan of this archetype and I find it very, very fun to play, and I think it stands to improve overall with tools against the other good decks and less leech being in the format, so I can highly recommend picking this one up right now. Last but not least, we have the spiciest list of the 5 I recommend playing right now. This one comes courtesy of Den CCG, another Marvel Snap Zone contributor. I'm going to call this Big Patriot for now, slightly different version of Patriot, looking to kind of shine, has access to some very powerful tools against the metagame, and maybe catching a few people off guard with synergies that haven't always been standard in the Patriot shell. I think Debris is a fantastic inclusion in this deck right now, giving you incredible counterplay into Galactus players, and Valkyrie really shines in a deck like this, while also giving you more power into a deck like Shuri Zero. The combination of Hood with Bast and even Doctor Doom is kind of a package that plays very well in Patriot, offering you extra stats with the namesake card, but often gives you the ability to win multiple locations alone, even if you don't happen to find your Patriot during the game, meaning you're going to retreat less often. I'd be kind of interested in exploring Mysterio in this shell for a similar reason, thanks to how well it does play with Bast. I think Valkyrie is a real shining star for a deck like this, and actually gives you the ability to steal cubes against many players who don't expect it, especially those Shuri Zero players, but honestly, universally across the Marvel Snap ladder. But overall, if you don't have it, you can definitely still just play a card like Shang-Chi in that slot, and get to play again another powerful proactive deck that's capable of producing stats, but also has tools to handle the two decks that I expect to be the most prominent on the Marvel Snap ladder. But what do you think? I'm super curious if your read of the metagame looks somewhat similar to mine, and whether you think enough has changed to give yourself more to look forward to in Marvel Snap going forward. Do you think a card like Negasonic Teenage Warhead is about to dramatically change what we know about the format so far? Let me know in the comments section down below, or come and join us in the official Marvel Snap Zone Discord server and come and talk 24 hours a day, all things Marvel Snap, with thousands of other players. But until next time, I've been HowlingMines. You have been amazing, and this has been Marvel Snap Zone. Take care of yourself. Have a good one.